Welcome to another episode of Inside the Bite. Today's topic is very close to my heart. Sometimes I feel the life is handing me a little too much to handle. So, how do we deal with it all? How do we save ourselves from the clutches of stress? Today, I have the perfect guest to discuss this. But also, today is special because I'm taking only your questions that you and the community members have posed to us. So let's welcome Dr. Miriam Goos. Miriam, a very warm welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me here, Mega. I'm delighted to be here and to share all the insights that I gathered in my whole life up to this point. And yeah, I'm a medical doctor. I'm a neurologist because I was always fascinated by the brain. And then in my clinical work, I dedicated my time on the one hand to the patients, but on the other hand to research and science. And during my clinical work, I realized we have an increasing problem because we have more and more patients coming to our wards with typical neurological symptoms like headache or dizziness, sudden numbness of arms and legs, back pain or sleeping disorders. And even though we were a university hospital, so we had the biggest variety of diagnostic opportunities, in more and more cases we didn't find an organic reason for that symptom anymore. And in more cases, we realized this is a stress reaction in these people. And it's getting so severe, so dramatic, and it's always, we as the doctors come at a very late point of time. So that's why I changed my profession 15 years ago. I founded Stress Fighter Experts in order to help creating more awareness about what is the stress physiology, what does stress to our body, how can we create awareness of our personal first signs and signals that the body sends us. And then, most important, how do we take it from here? How do we find healthy pathways that avoid that we at some point have to end up in the clinic with that.
So, what is stress, Miriam? And what is the difference between stress and anxiety?
Yeah, that is so often mixed up, right? And stress, we use it in a big variety of meanings. In the end, biologically, stress is a super helpful and very smart reaction of our body because it propels us into a state of peak performance. It's a state of activation. So our brain is constantly screening our environment, whether it is a potential threatful situation or whether it's kind of a relaxing moment. And as soon as we realize our environment as something that applies some kind of expectation, pressure, emergency situation, then our body shifts, our autonomous nervous system shifts into the sympathetic state, and our heart rate is increasing, our whole blood perfusion is increasing, the muscles have a higher tension, our digestive system is slowing down because it's a fight or flight reaction. And when we look back to history, in the moment of fight or flight, digestion didn't make sense in that moment. It was all prepared for either fighting or flighting. So increasing our physical state into a state of peak performance. Anxiety, on the other hand, is, it's a different feeling for us at the first place. It doesn't feel good. We don't feel empowered, right? It's more a state of freeze. And it often happens when we feel like our resources are not sufficient to deal with the situation that we have to face. And it often is connected to long-term stress. That's also the fact that I realized, or that I could see so frequently in the clinical world, that people tended to work on function on autopilot, and there was a constant low-level stress reaction going on for a long period of time because it was constantly connected to this anxiety feeling, and that in the end results in a totally different state of the body. It's not giving us that peak performance, but it's rather draining our energy on a constant, slow, often even unnoticed level.
Right. So, what is our brain doing? Because it sounds like long-term stress is what then leads to anxiety because maybe we are predicting that some things may not go our way or some things may not turn out the way we would want or we may not be able to deal with it. What is our brain doing here?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And we always see that the amygdala is the area of the brain which first gives us a signal or signals into the rest of the brain when we are under stress. And you can maybe make that metaphor of a skyscraper, a big office building, and the amygdala would be maybe the ground floor. But our whole strategic thinking, our rational thinking, sits up in the top floor of this building. And the more stress we perceive, the more our ground level is going crazy. So we see flashlights with red and green, and they are in a constant alarmed state. And as this happens, we're just cutting Wi-Fi and energy from the CEO level up there. So our strategic thinking is definitely influenced by that, and we're just getting less capable up there. So when we are in this stress reaction and the amygdala is constantly firing, then sometimes we end up in this vicious circle, and every little sign we perceive it as potentially threatful.
Right. Miriam, I have known you for many years. We've known each other for many years, and I've seen you work through your career, your life, your three children so beautifully. How do you deal with it all? How do you manage the stress of just keeping it all together?
Yeah, that actually has been probably the biggest challenge of my life with kids. Because, yeah, as I also know you for a long time, and I think we are very similar in having high expectations of ourselves and always giving everything at work. And during my clinical education, I always, gave all my energy into my patients. And after going home from the ward, or not going home, going to the lab directly and conducting research in the evening, but it was always possible, right? Because I could work for 14, 16, whatever, 18 hours and then go home, and I just had to take care of myself. And that changed in the minute that I got my first child. And in the beginning, I tried to proceed with whatever I've done to always give my everything. But the problem was when I then came home, there was not only myself that I had to take care of, but there was also another person or even more persons that required my energy and my engagement. And when I got more and more expertise of stress and stress measurement and stress management, I found a device that is a great help in this case. It's a little recorder that you can apply to your body, and it's measuring our heart rate variability, and you can always get a visual feedback whether your body is in a red zone, that means it is activated, it is in the stress reaction, or on the contrary, it's in the green zone, it's in a relaxed and regenerative state.
Interesting. So you're not relying on triggers. We always talk about we need to be more aware of when we are getting the trigger to stress, which is truly the hardest part. So now you're not relying on that anymore, but it's a device that is helping you with that.
Yeah, it's just helping you to create that awareness. I think, of course, the goal should be to be aware of yourself, that you don't need that little recorder. But initially, it helps you quite good to understand. And what I realized there was that, oh my God, I'm red throughout my almost 24 hours. There's hardly a moment except from the few hours that I
Yeah.
slept, obviously. And that is, I think, the challenge for us mothers, that we hardly take these moments of green where we can spend some time with ourselves and give our body the opportunity for physical recovery. And that got so obvious to me in that moment when I started measuring myself, and I realized, okay, this is something that I need to change. That is just like we said in the beginning, it's just leading to chronic stress and not the stress peaks that are actually beneficial to us.
Right. And there are many, many people who are parents who are listening to this or to be parents. Yeah. And this is quite personal a question, and I know you, so I think I can ask that. I know you had a medical situation too. And it was a pretty scary one. I mean, I was scared for you. And with very young children, what did you tell yourself? And if you don't mind sharing with the audience what it was and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, obvious. Yeah, sure. It was a congenital heart defect that got detected when I was only, I think in that time I was 38. So it was never discovered before. But then in the Netherlands where we met, they found it at a checkup. and they told me this needs to be operated, and it will be a big heart surgery, a big thoracic surgery where your recovery time will be approximately 3 months. And yeah, the percentage that you might not survive this surgery, it is low, it is 1%, but still there is an opportunity, right? So to be honest, for 4 years, I just pushed this surgery out. I even ripped the letters of the hospital apart at home because I just could not imagine myself undergoing this surgery. And yeah, for the kids, bringing them at risk to grow up without a mother in that very young age. But with the age of 42, so after 4 years, I realized, okay, now when I go running, when I exercise, I realized that it's getting worse. So the pressure was on. And also the doctors told me, if you don't get the surgery now, then you will definitely suffer from a long-term effect that is
Right.
irreversible at some point. And that's why the pressure was too high. So I really needed to do that. And I made sure that everything was planned out for the kids. I had a lot of support from my loving family, I have to say.
I
And
remember that you had everything planned out. I remember.
yeah, I'm so grateful still. And even afterwards, it was just a perfect system. So much support of neighbors, friends,
Yeah.
family, and everything worked well. But from then on, I knew also because the heart is quite strongly connected to how we feel, socially supported, how balanced we are. And I think balance is a key word in this case because the heart is super sensitive. And especially after surgery, I now have a scar. And whenever I have a little bit more stressful situations, I realize it because I get these arrhythmic extra beats of my heart. So I really had to put a lot of attention and focus how I can strengthen my heart and this balancing lifestyle that I really make sure I have green zones. Of course, I have areas in my life as red stressful times. They make me perform and they make me live up to my expectations. But they always need to be balanced with these green regenerative times. Otherwise, it's just a short-term effect.
Right. And it is a difficult situation. And you know about my brain surgery a couple of years ago. Again, the similar decision making on, hey, the children are too small. And I remember writing goodbye letters to them just the weekend before the surgery. It was the
Oh my
hardest
God,
thing
yeah.
I did because, yeah, what do you write to your two children who you want to tell everything about life? And how do you translate that to 2, 3 pages of letters? And thankfully those letters were never given to them. They were sealed, and my instruction was only give it to them if something happens. But I mean, one of the reasons I do this is exactly that. It was a wake up call for me as well, and I was not a very unhealthy person. I was always mindful, but still, like you said, we like to give 100% or more than 100% to everything that we do. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast and the work that I'm doing right now for the community is exactly that they don't have to land up in these kind of situations before realizing we are important too.
Yeah, I think that is so helpful because we have these high expectations of ourselves and we always want to be the perfect person, right? The perfect employee, the perfect workshop leader, the perfect doctor. We always want to give everything. And this is only possible when we also make sure that we give ourselves enough time to fully regenerate. Otherwise, it's just a slowly degrading process, and we are never going to bring our old energy and our old capabilities into life.
Yeah, and it's a never-ending to-do list. So for us, I mean, it just doesn't end. It just keeps going on
No.
and on and on. There needs to be self-care, and I love the idea about your device. So please tell me what device it is. Please tell us all what device it is because I'm for sure going to rely on that more.
Can I quickly, I think I can even fetch it here from my,
Super.
yeah. I have it here. It's from First Beat. It's a company that is working with athletes and it's measuring the heart rate variability. It's just a very light recorder and you just get sticky electrodes and you apply one here and one just underneath your left breast. And then you can wear it 3 to 5 days and you get a visual feedback on the app which shows you whether you are in a stress state or you're in a relaxing, regenerative state. And that is just so beneficial for us to sometimes get that mirror of where do I spend most of my time during the day.
My numbers are not going to be great. I think these numbers, but maybe that's why I should do it. It's not uncomfortable to wear it 3 to 5 days.
Not at all. I also felt like sometimes, even when we had a ball from the school and I knew, okay, I'm going to wear a nice gown, then I cannot wear it. But actually, it's just so thin that, and I mean, of course, probably I wouldn't wear it if I have like a bigger décolleté, but usually I wear something more closed and then it's not visible at all. Even when I do sports, Pilates or running, you don't feel like it's bothering you.
I just want to say it very clear to the audience. This is not sponsored. They're not sponsoring this podcast. It's something that Miriam personally uses, and I would love to try. I love trying different devices. Let's talk about kids, especially in the situation that you have gone through. How did you keep kids away from this stress when you were going through your surgery, but also on a daily basis in life? Of course, kids feel what we feel as mothers. So, how do you keep them away from stress?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the key is it's not needed that we protect them from all the stress. I think stress is an absolute valid part of our life, and it's an old archaic biological reaction in our body. And in the end, it also brings us into this physical state that we are more performant, that we are much faster in our brain, and the body is prepared to be much stronger and more active. So it is a good physiological state. But I think the key element is here really balance. And for balance, we also need times when we really can fully let go and when we feel fully safe, secure, nothing can harm us in that moment. And I think that point is particularly important when it comes to kids, right? So we shouldn't always try to be the perfect parents. The kids don't need perfect parents. They need regulated parents, balanced parents. So for us as parents, I think it's the most important point to start with is to see, am I neurobiologically regulated? Do I have a healthy balance of moments when I'm giving my everything, I put all my energy out there, I'm really focused, and probably there is high adrenaline in that moment flushing through my body. But do I then balance it out with times where I can just let go and not continuously have my to-do list up in my head? And these regulation or these relaxation and regeneration phases of the parents also allow the kids to then fully balance their stress reactions out. Because science shows that stress levels are contagious. And I think that's something that we can all relate to if you work in a team or if also in the family, right? If my husband has like a super high pressure because of some topics at work, we all sense that and we can all feel our inner stress levels being affected by that, right? So it is important for us as parents to be aware that it's our responsibility to take good care of ourselves, because only then we can provide the kids with that healthy balance as well.
It's something important you say because I feel stress of people right away. The moment I meet them, even without anyone saying a word, I can feel their stress levels. And sometimes with my husband, I'm saying, "Hey, you are stressed. Just tell me what it is that's stressing you out." And a lot of times, a lot of men, and that's what I hear from other moms that I work with as well, the fathers are not really sharing, even with the wives, on what's stressing them. It could just be work stress, it could be other factors. And that is something, the communication between the parents is, I feel, in the day of today, because we are running so fast all the time, it seems to be broken. And that's something I'd love to understand from you, how you and your husband, and I know your husband, thankfully, as well, you both, I've seen, are quite inspirational parents on how you guys are managing the whole situation, no matter how difficult it gets for you. So, how do you both communicate with each other and make sure that that connection stays?
Yeah, I think that is actually a secret how I also made it that far in a quite healthy state. I think my partnership or my relationship is so supportive in that way. But it's, of course, it requires a lot of attention, awareness, and energy as well. So, but we just always felt like it's such a relief for us sharing what is going on in our head. And of course, that needs time, and it needs certain times where you're undisturbed from the children. It needs to be like real focus on ourselves and on what the other one is telling me to really listen and to really understand. And I think from quite early on, we had our date nights planned, and it wasn't super regularly, but it was, I think, maybe once every 2 weeks. We deliberately took the time to do that, to go out for dinner or and not always meeting friends. Of course, we often did that, but we also needed time where when we were just sitting there and having this undisturbed time of sharing what was going on in our life, what was bothering us, what was challenging us, what was worrying us. And then, yeah, we got a lot of support from each other. And I think, yeah, that was super helpful. Also, we did this exercise because I was quite unhappy when we moved to Amsterdam. Our international school was a little bit further away, and I had to spend a lot of time just driving the kids to school and picking them up. That I felt like my time for work is shrinking. You remember, right?
I remember, but this is a challenge a lot of parents have, a lot of moms have it these days because of how we are raising the generation, our children's generation. But we all have this challenge. Sometimes we feel like chauffeurs, isn't it? We're just drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, it can be quite nice. Now I have my teenage kids, and I see that conversations are getting a little bit more tricky, right? Because once we sit at dinner, they feel like they are not always oversharing. They are a little bit in their own world. But when you sit in the car right next to each other, looking in the same direction, it seems to facilitate conversation. So
Interesting.
sometimes it's important, yeah.
Very interesting. Okay. Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
that time, it just took too much time of my life. And I love to do this love and hate exercise also with my husband. So what are the things that we love doing during the week? If we look at each day, day by day, all the tasks, all the things that we are spending our time with, and what is it that we really hate? And I felt like, okay, I cannot, totally get rid of the driving, of course, but there is this option of taking the bus, the school bus, the expensive school bus. And in the end, because in that exercise, became super clear, wow, this is just eating all the time that I really would like to dedicate to my work, especially in the mornings. And from then on, I just thought, okay, I just need a little bit, I just need to work a little bit more in order to afford the bus in the mornings. But that was something that I discovered with Philip during one of these dinner dates, that we should just spend the money for the bus in the morning, because that will allow and give me much more freedom to be then also in a quite different, more relaxed state when I go and pick them up in the afternoon.
Yeah, yeah. And that's something that I had learned from you back then. You said something to me. You said, I try to spend as much as needed on very important stuff to outsource it. And that's something that stuck with me. I'm a firm believer of raising children myself and not necessarily putting it just to nannies. I find it more exciting to raise children myself. I've worked with Philip, your husband, as well. I found it very interesting that you knew what he knew always, always. And that told me you guys were communicating so well. And there are rarely any couples that I come across that communicate with each other in this beautiful, amazing fashion that I saw. And even when we were walking in Amsterdam to a lunch place, for example, with the team, Philip was always on the lookout for your date nights. He was always looking at, oh, this is a great restaurant to take Miriam to. And I found that so special, especially knowing how hectic both of your lives were. And as all of ours, by the way, I mean, Amsterdam is a beautiful place to live, and it has very little support system in terms of house help, for example. Daycare is amazing, but yeah, some of these things that you mentioned. So I think it was a very beautiful thing to see and inspirational how you guys were communicating with each other.
Yeah, I think that still is the secret of our relationship, because now we have this long distance relationship because he works during the week in Munich and I work here in Berlin. And yeah, for the family, it was kind of, quite a big challenge actually when he moved, because that was around that time that also my oldest daughter moved out, and then you feel like the family is slowly drawn into different directions, and it's more than necessary to to call on a regular basis to remain or to maintain that strong connection. I am super grateful that he also keeps on reminding me of that. He is calling me, even though he has such a packed day, he's calling me at 7:38 in the morning. And, during his bicycle ride to his office, we are just telling us about every little detail that happened. Probably not about every detail, but yeah, what are the things that are really important to us and what are keeping us busy in our head.
Yeah. And you guys have really done a great job. So kudos to you. There are barely any couples, like I've said, who communicate so well with each other. So really, really, it's a pleasure to know both of you, and really
Thank
nice.
you, Mega.
The only thing that I think about, Miriam, and this is true for me, this is true for many moms, is why do we feel so emotionally exhausted even when during the day it doesn't feel like we've done physically something super exhausting? What's happening there with us?
Yeah, I absolutely can relate to that feeling. Sometimes, especially after long days in the clinical world and then rushing home because I already had a bad conscience leaving the kids with the babysitters for too long. I felt so drained. And what did I do? I walked a little bit around the hallways of the hospital, but like you say, no real physical work. And it's just that we as a human being have changed and drifted our life into a totally different environment and day-to-day routine, right? Imagine that our DNA is only 1%, not even a 1% different to our DNA during our Stone Age times, when we were mainly actively looking for food, for providing our family with safety and enough nutrition to survive. And I think there are maybe four key factors that have changed so dramatically. So the first factor, I think, is really our mobility, our exercise, our movement. Nowadays, we all have jobs that are mainly happening in the sedentary lifestyle. So we are sitting mostly throughout our day, right? We have breakfast in the seated position. Then we maybe take the car or the train to work, where we actually also sit mostly in the waiting halls for the trains, for the flights. We always have a favor to find a spot to sit, right? We don't like to stand there. And we have dinner and lunch in the seated position. When we meet friends, it's leisure time, but still most of the time we sit and talk. And working, I don't even need to mention the work. We're almost glued to our screens. And that is such a radical contrast to what our body is physiologically built for. We are built for, going hunting, going collecting fruits or plants to feed ourselves. So this is, I think, the first big contrast. The second thing is the circadian rhythm, the daylight that influences our whole sleep hormone production dramatically. Because usually when we think of these times of the Stone Age, or even when we just think of a camping trip, when we are mainly, dealing with the natural light, then we see that we get much earlier tired, and we have a tendency to sleep deeper and longer at an earlier time of the night. Whereas nowadays in our day-to-day life, there is so much artificial light. We are living in a polluted environment of constant artificial light, which is totally bringing our sleep hormones, irritating our sleep hormones. So melatonin production starts much later than it naturally would do. And that shortens our regenerative time at night, which is so necessary, right? The sleep is not the time that we lose. Sometimes we think, oh, I cannot spend too much time sleeping, but sleep is not time lost. It's the biological recovery. It's the longest time of recovery for our body. So it's so needed and healthy for us. And that is the second point affected.
So I love sleeping. I'm a big fan
That's
of
good.
sleeping, and I can do these cat naps, which is relatively recent phenomena in my life. But I was famous for sleeping even in school. If I would get punished against the wall, that was the best thing, when I had to turn towards the wall, because then I could just sleep away, and that was the beautiful thing about getting punished for me. But I also read somewhere that even Einstein would take multiple naps a day to replenish the brain. And of course, if your brain is working that hard, I feel my brain sometimes works too hard, and then if one one cat nap and I'm ready to go again. So sleeping for me is very important one. Before we go to third and fourth factor, what is the recommendation usually when we talk of number of hours that we need and kids need in terms of sleep?
Yeah, I think for us parents, it's between 7 and 9 hours. We are all a little bit different,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it is 7 to 9 hours. I think I would never recommend to sleep less than 7 hours. Of course, we are a little bit different, and it always depends on how performant do I feel during the day. But the thing is, sometimes we slightly get used to having less sleep, and then we feel like, no, I'm all right. But we're missing out on our opportunities because we just slowly get used to feel the state that we are feeling, and we think it's okay, I'm not suffering during the day, but I could be much better, much smarter, much better neuronally connected when I get more sleep. And for kids, it's even longer. For kids, of course, we have different recommendations for different age groups. And teenagers should at least sleep 8 to 10 hours. So my kids are in that zone from 13 to 18 years old. They should sleep 8 to 10 hours. And that's a particular challenge at the moment, right? Because they all have their mobile phones that are so attractive to them. And when they sleep with them in the room, then it's very hard for them to get to these 8 to 10 hours. School age children, so even younger, 6 to 12 years old, should have 9 to 12 hours per night. Also, there's a little bit of individual differences, but sleep is just so important. It's our longest period of recovery, and we can see that brain development is happening in that time. We have this lymphatic system where we are cleansing our brain from all the toxins. And yeah, it would be a big missing out if we don't give our body enough time for that.
I don't think a lot of children are getting 9 to 12 hours in the primary age group. What do you expect happens in the brains or the impact of not sleeping enough for them?
Yeah, you can sense that they are much more under stress. They are highly irritable, and they have problems focusing and being in a balanced and kind of calm state. It's like ourselves when we all know how bad it feels if we are sleep deprived, right? If we didn't get enough sleep for a period of time. Of course, we are better in maybe in hiding it, or, just putting on autopilot, and we just do whatever we have planned, but on a lower energy level and with less focus ability. But for the kids, their brain is not so mature yet, not so well wired. For them, it's so physically exhausting, and we can see that they have the tendency to cry more, to not behave in the way that we usually know them. And yeah, they don't have the ability to direct their behavior in like sovereign and deliberate ways. There's often this edge behavior that shows. So they are on the edge. They are not in that fully rested state.
Yeah. And then, so we've talked about mobility, we've talked about circadian rhythm, sleep. What are the third and fourth factors?
And nutrition has changed dramatically, right? Because we have this ultra processed food everywhere, and even in all the places that we spend most of our time in at work or at school or wherever, often we are provided food from big kitchens that use some artificial ultra processed food. So it's a challenge for us nowadays to really gain as much vitamins and fibers and the good healthy minerals from our food than we used to when compared to the Stone Age, where everything was needed to be super fresh because we couldn't store it for longer periods of time. Nowadays, an apple that you buy in the supermarket in the US is on average 11 months old. So it's almost a spoon of sugar that you're eating. But of course, all the minerals, all the vitamins
Oh,
have
so
vanished.
really? So an apple is 11 months old, which basically means they're good. How does it work? Explain to me, because it's being stored for 11 months, but I'm guessing some minerals are still there. They must have taken care of it, no?
Yeah, of course, they make sure that they can still sell it and that it tastes more or less fresh. But they have always improved their storing mechanisms or storing devices, holds, whatever. But vitamins and minerals, especially in that moment that you pick them, that you pick the apples are in the best kind of connection, because we can sometimes only digest vitamins when they are in a certain combination with minerals, and yeah, when this is the perfect constellation. And that is something that definitely suffers when we store them for too long. But of course, in our nowadays super economic driven world, that makes sense. We always want to have fresh picked apples, or that at least taste and look like that. But when we investigate and really look deeper into the amount of vitamins that are still in there, it's a huge difference whether it's freshly picked or if it has been stored for 11 months. Makes absolutely sense, right? That's why we also have a preference for deep frozen food, because then it is at least more preserved in that shock frozen state. Then we can see that the vitamins are better maintained rather than storing them somewhere for 11 months.
Right, right.
And the whole nutrition field has changed dramatically. So, and we can see that nutrition has a huge impact on our physical state as well, because we have silent inflammations that are triggered by the food that we're consuming. So it's already three things that are coming together, right? We are not moving enough, we are not sleeping enough, or we have not the same quality of sleep, and we are producing silent inflammations because of the nutrients that we are missing and the wrong food that we are consuming. And the fourth thing, I think, which is more and more getting dominant, is that we don't have that old stress responses where we peak at a certain time, where we have to fight an animal to get the meat from it, or where we have to escape from somewhere to save our life, like these peak stress reactions that are super healthy and beneficial for our body. But nowadays, who has that, right? Nowadays, we have these longer, constantly remaining stress reactions. We feel like there is always an expectation brought towards us, either from the job or from the family or from relatives. So, which always constantly brings us into a slightly stress responsive body, but we don't have that nice profile where we have this peak performance and then we totally slow down, regenerate, relax again, and then we're ready for the next peak. Nowadays, our stress profile looks more like little ups and downs, but we are never going really down here. So it's more like a slowly degrading process over time.
It's very interesting what you say, that our DNA is only 1% different from our ancestors 10,000 years ago. So, why is it so important for our stress profile to look like this rather than what you see now?
Yeah, we are physically built for that. This is how our whole body evolved over time. And that's what our DNA and our whole chemistry is made for. And now we have this shift, but we are still 99 or more than 99% prepared for that other lifestyle. And in the combination of these four factors, we can see that it makes us sick. We have more silent inflammations happening inside our body to the combination of too little sleep, too little movement. Also, these other effects are just building up, because when we don't move enough and we still have the constant production of cortisol. Cortisol is actually our stress hormone that is more produced when we have this long-term stress reaction. These peaks, then we mainly produce adrenaline and noradrenaline. But when our body feels like, wow, this is not just for a moment, for 15 minutes or 30 minutes, but it's an ongoing stress reaction, then it produces cortisol in order to provide our body with this higher energy level that is needed for that stress reaction. And we can see that cortisol only gets a chance to be degraded when we move, because biologically we produce these stress hormones to make us more physically performant and active. But when we never give the body that signal, okay, now I moved, now it's time to degrade the cortisol again, then it's just accumulating in our body. So we have the accumulation of cortisol, first of all, because we have that rising stress level. And second, because we don't give the body the opportunity to let go of it and reduce it again, because we're physically active. And then the sleep as well is so important to bring our autonomic nervous system in balance. And if we always cutting out sleep because of the artificial lighting, then also repairing processes are not happening. And from the food, there are all these silent inflammations happening. This is like a huge topic that is investigated now in the terms of longevity, right? We can can see that these silent inflammations are the underlying cause why we age, why cells are aging. And they are the first step on the road to cardiovascular diseases, to Alzheimer's, to neurodegenerative diseases, to metabolic diseases, diabetes, and everything. So our current lifestyle is just not in line with what we are biologically built for. And that disbalance or that contrast lets us get sick. And also we feel that we are not so mentally balanced. We feel exhausted, drained by our body, because always when we have these silent inflammations, our immune system is triggered.
Right.
And when we compare how much energy different organs in the body usually use, then the immune system, if it is in a calm state, if it doesn't need to be active, it just consumes relatively small amount of energy. But with these ongoing silent inflammations, the immune system is stimulated, is triggered, and then it consumes a lot of energy. It really takes the energy out from other organs, from the heart, from the liver, from the kidneys, from the brain. So that is also a reason why we feel so emotionally, and not only emotionally, but physically drained nowadays.
So interesting, and it's completely clear to me. We were not built for the modern lifestyle and conveniences, which is what we are living. So let's say, okay, that is our situation now. We are completely thrown off by just this modern conveniences and lifestyle. Across these four things, how do we go about it? So what if we are the humans that were 10,000 years ago, but with the modern lifestyle? How do we go about having more mobility, better sleep, better nutrition, better stress responses? How do we design around us a system that helps us do that?
Yeah, that is a key question for us nowadays, because we cannot go back to Stone Age, right? Nobody is going to give in to that. And we also have to be honest, we appreciate the lifestyle that we have nowadays. And we are
I'm a
much,
cave
I mean, there
person.
are so many.
I would 100% go live in a cave anytime, anytime. No WhatsApp.
Yeah, but that also seems kind of liberating, right? Away from all the constant accessibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe that is the secret in the end, to not, fully miss out on all the nice things that we build up, but always remind ourselves, what are we built for, and how can I best find that balance, and this bringing us back to at least giving my body maybe not 100%, but 80% what it needs to be sustainable, and to also benefit from this well-being, from this empowered state that your body is not drained all the time. And I think, yeah, it's just the key factors, like trying to move during the day. And I think that is, of course, we talked about it, especially as young families, it's such a stretch. And I'm working with a lot of consultancy companies where I work with the consultants, and they often are young parents, and they do their overtime at work. And then, of course, there's always the thought in the back of their head, okay, I want to come home immediately and spend the time with my kids. And for sports, there is just no time at all at the moment, because it's already a split between professional life and family life. But I think there we really need to be egoistic, because it's in the long run, this will help us to be these better regulated parents for our kids, and everything will benefit from it. And what I often see is that young parents, they both feel so obliged to spend all the time with their kids once they are in their free time. And there I would definitely say, try to be a little bit more forgiving, or maybe even generous with your partner, like allow your partner to sneak out for an hour or 30 minutes, or maybe even 20 to 15 minutes. But it will in the end make a huge difference whether you moved for these 15 to 20 minutes, or whether you just constantly feel like, but I should be here because I want to be the best dad or the best mom.
Yeah. Are there things, let's get practical. So mobility. Are there things during the day while I'm working that I can do which can help me
Abs-
move more?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think every movement counts. Just sometimes I work with people, and during our meeting, I just encourage them, okay, now let's do a 2.5 minute sitting break. It means not that we take a break and sit down, but rather the opposite. We take a break from the sitting that we anyway do most of the time. So I just put on a good song and then we do movement. We just try to circle our joints. We do some jumping jacks and maybe a little bit of running just for 2 minutes. And if you do that maybe twice a day, you will definitely feel different at the end of the day. And it's just twice 2.5 minutes that already makes a huge difference. Just really try to power yourself out. Put on a good song if you feel encouraged, but that not even necessary. You just use every chance that you get. For instance, if you see a staircase, always see it as an opportunity for you to degrade all the stress hormones that have been accumulating over the day. Or there's a 7-minute app. I don't know if you know about that.
I'm a big
Yeah,
fan. I've survived on this since I don't know, 15 years now because
it's amazing, right?
yeah, and I'm an ex-consultant too, so there was at times no time to go to the gym. So yeah, I mean, 7-minute workout is just perfect.
It's perfect. It's like a pearl, right? Because you can do it wherever you are. If you are traveling, if you're in a hotel, if you don't need any equipment, you don't need much time. But it's just a collection of exercises, 7 minutes, and I think 12 exercises, right? Every exercise for 40 seconds or something like that. And the good thing is I have one friend and he is constantly traveling, also transatlantic flights and going to the different time zones. And he does it depending on the day between 1 and 4 times a day. So then you can even extend it easily to 28 minutes, and you can squeeze it in between meetings, but it's just so powerful.
Yeah, and there is no excuse not to move for 7 minutes, and it's not
Exactly.
exercising, it's just moving. So if you can't move for 7 minutes in a day, I don't know. Then
Yeah, it's a conscious decision, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, and the best thing is to really shift your focus from this is something that I should do. It's like a diet, something that I need to do to get rid of my fat or to exceeding body mass that I'm not happy with. I think we should go away from this. I should do it. I have to do it to more. This is giving me a chance to get rid of my stress levels. This is a chance for me to be in a more calm and relaxing state tonight when I want to go to bed, because it does make a huge difference. It's just always an opportunity, and if you're not making use of it, it's just a loss.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, then we've talked about mobility. We have talked about sleep. You have given very clear answer and recommendation on the number of hours. We have talked about nutrition slightly. And this is, by the way, the area that we cover a lot. And we've done a lot of work around nutrition. Any tips that you have for how do you eat healthy, or what can we do around us?
Yeah, I think nutrition is a big part, and I had a lot of talks about it. And I think often we know what we need to do, right? We should eat protein rich, fiber rich, always with the emphasis on a plant rich and diverse diet, and trying to avoid all these hydrated fats and the artificial sugar or sweeteners as well, to then also try to keep our blood sugar stable. I'm working with these trackers as well to see that we are in a different state when we keep our blood sugar levels more or less on an even level throughout the day. So there are a lot of recommendations, and I think many of them we know, but sometimes the why is getting a little bit in the background, and we feel more like we're, I don't know, not that autonomous in our decisions. It feels like a little bit somebody is asking, you should eat more vegetables, you should prepare a healthy dinner. And I think it is just so important to see that we have the brain-gut axis. So our gut is constantly in conversation with our brain and vice versa. So there is this strong connection which we often underestimate. And what we eat, and I think if we think of how we react to certain kind of food, and also what are the moments when we feel drawn to have this fast food, or when we feel like an addiction to open that package of biscuits or something, then we can see the connection. There was something that brought our brain state into a position where we are not that in control of making good decisions anymore. we have a higher stress level often. And when we eat more junk food or not so well, not so plant rich, then our whole physiology, our whole body state doesn't feel good.
Yeah, let me come back to this because it's a bigger topic for us to address, and there are a couple of things there about healthy habits, but also what is happening with the stress eating. But before I go there, let's talk about stress responses that is expected of our body and brain. What do? We go pick up bar fight to get our stress up.
To consciously have these little outbursts of performance.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is good. But it's, yeah, like putting yourself out into little uncomfortable situations definitely boosts our resilience. It's like we're training a muscle, right? If we always keep everything comfortable and in a certain range, like we always give ourselves to sleep as long as we want and then go and live throughout our day without any moments where we are kicked out of our comfort zone, then our body is just slowly narrowing the comfort zone because everything, it's also like with temperature, for instance, if we always live our life in a zone of 20 to 22 degrees, we already will feel, oh, this is crazy if we are in a heat of 24 degrees, for instance. So this is all the big topic of hormetic stimulation that we consciously, and science has done a lot of research on that in the last years, that our body and also our mind sometimes needs to be kicked out of the comfort zone. And it actually helps us to bring ourselves in this little stress response. Or you were hiking the Kilimanjaro, right?
Yes.
And then it was exercise, extreme movement, exercise for the body. And in addition, there was also this altitude that provided you with less oxygen. So these are all super healthy stressors. Of course, it's a dose response curve here, right? We cannot do it from 0 to 100 and then expect our body to feel perfectly fine about it. But if we do it, it will just widen up our zone in that we are actively functioning and feeling okay with that. So it is important to sometimes bring us into these little stress moments.
Yeah, it reminds me, my resting heart rate is quite high compared to most people. And then after climbing Kilimanjaro, when I came back and I started exercising again, my resting heart rate, in fact, while I was exercising, my heart rate was below my usual resting heart rate. And that was really interesting to me that I'd apparently built such a strong physical stamina that it actually impacted my numbers almost on a permanent basis. But of course, we can't.
Amazing, right?
Yeah. And of course, we can't climb Kilimanjaro every day. So, on a daily basis, aside from picking a bar fight, what is it that we can do to put ourselves in situations where we are getting that boost?
Yeah, it's so important that we sometimes consciously and deliberately put ourselves in these situations. So we can do, for instance, experiment with the temperature. So sauna as well as ice bath has been shown to have super beneficial effects on our body in increasing our resilience. And it's super healthy for our cardiovascular system as well as for our immune system. So we have a tendency to just be much more resilient towards little pathogens floating around. And also with the nutrition, with the food consumption. Nowadays in our industrial world, it's so easy to be constantly snacking, right? There's always something that we can snack. And for the body, it's much better, and that's what we are actually built for, to have a meal, but then don't consume food for a period of several hours. And that has been shown that it's really reducing these silent inflammations. So it's also providing us with energy in the end if we just reduce our food intake to certain times of the day. So these are all little things that we can do, like food restriction for certain hours of the day, sauna with that extreme heat, ice bath with that extreme cold, exercise. And I can totally relate to what you said, that your heart rate decreased after this exercise of climbing Kilimanjaro. So I was always a runner. Running was my stress management technique. So I remember even during my studies, always when it came to the exams, I was running like crazy. It was the best thing because it was like an autonomic thing that happened. I just realized when I looked at the kilometers that I ran, that I spent running in these months of my exams, they were just always going up, even without me planning that. And after my cardio surgery, I couldn't do that. I really needed to slowly build up again. And it was super interesting because, like you said, then I could also see starting running again. And when I then measured it again with that device with the green and the red zones, I could see that it helped me jumping from the red to the green zone again. So the running is having such a good effect, even though it feels sometimes quite exhausting, right? And especially if I do these interval runs where I run faster for a period of time. But this is so positively impacting our capability to relax again and to regenerate.
Yeah,
So it's, yeah, these are all these little stressors that we can do.
I've recently heard about 4x4s. It's you do whatever exercise you're doing, you do it intensely for 4 minutes, where your heart rate is 85% of your highest heart rate, allowed
Yeah.
heart rate, which is basically 220 minus your age.
It's this interval training where you do this, where you push yourself to have that limits or to that limits. And it's always training your VO2 max, like your
That's it. Yeah.
performance of the body, and also by that having a positive impact on your quality of regeneration during times where you allow yourself to take a break.
So let's talk about nutrition. Why is it that we do stress eating? What is happening there?
So we can see that when we produce stress hormones in our brain, then it is directly affecting our microbiome in our digestive system. And the whole stomach and the whole digestive system, when it is under stress, it feels like, oh my God, we need to extract everything that is possible from our digestive system because we cannot afford to lose something valuable like minerals and salts and sugars and nutrients. So the gut is actually opening. The tiny little spaces between the cells is opening up. They are usually closed by tight junctions. It's like a little thing that closes the cells in between each other. And when we are under stress, it's opening up. And then we have also things that we don't want to have in the bloodstream. So it's called the leaky gut syndrome, that our gut is slowly leaking things that are not supposed to leak, actually. And that always causes an inflammatory response in the lymphatic system that is around our digestive system. And that, again, is just increasing the stress. And our body feels like, oh my God, now it's even more important to provide us with the sugars, with the fats, with things that are filling up my energy level. So it's like a vicious circle. The more stressed we are, the more we have the tendency to grab energy-rich foods like fatty and sugary foods. And then it leads to these silent inflammations again, which is constantly continuing. When we measure the blood sugar with these continuous blood sugar measurement trackers, then it's so transparent, so clearly what happens. Because when we start, for instance, with a sweet breakfast, something where we have a lot of starch, flour, or even sugar in our breakfast, like a bread with some jam or a sweetened muesli, something like that, then we can see that our blood sugar is exploding right after the muesli. And of course, the situation in the body is reacting to that high blood sugar spike by secretion of insulin by our digesting hormone that is produced in our pancreas. So it is reacting towards the high blood sugar spike and wants to help to bring all the sugar in the cells. And because it is such a high spike, it's just producing a huge amount of insulin, and all the sugar is going directly into the cells, which results in a drop of the blood sugar. And that, again, lets us crave more because the blood sugar dropped so radically that we want more.
Right. And it's interesting. So there's a stress response that makes us want to have, I will simplify it for a layman. So if we have a stress response, our body wants more energy. Yeah. Energy is technically or typically linked biologically to fats and sugars. The challenge probably comes in the modern lifestyle where sugars have been linked to the added sugars rather than the better sources of sugar. Is that
Yeah.
right? Or is that accurate conclusion?
No, that's true. Absolutely. We are just in this modern world. It's always possible for us to grab fatty, sugary snacks, right? And often in a very unhealthy combination, fried fats, hardened fats, and raffinated sugars. And as it is always accessible for us, we don't start with the healthy salad first or something. It's because our body is still craving for this fast. The body is, it's just super smart. It wants fast, the best energy it can get. And if we look back to the Stone Age, then there was not always, a muesli bar or a chocolate bar at hand. So we needed to eat what we could find, and which was mainly fruits or plants, and then also the rice or the whatever grains we found were already the big asset to get that energy. But it was always combined with fibers, and fibers are so making the big difference here, because nowadays our food that contains a lot of fat and sugars, it doesn't have normally a lot of fibers. And fibers, it's a natural mechanism, because when we can see how the food is digested, when we start with something that has a lot of fiber, it's slowly passing down our stomach and then going to our duodenum. And the fibers, they build something like a net, all the fibers of the plants. And we can see that little sugar molecules, they just slowly make their way through this net and then can slowly be absorbed by the blood or by the surrounding blood vessels of the stomach, of the duodenum. But nowadays, we don't have that fiber network anymore. So we have the muesli bar or the chocolate bar, the banana, which doesn't have so much fiber, and the sugar comes directly, and it's just increasing in a big spike because all the sugar is immediately able to be resorbed from the digestive system.
Right. So, why is it so hard to stay consistent with healthy habits, even though when I know what to do? And I remember, Miriam, I heard you once say willpower is the worst strategy the brain has. And so tell me, why is it for us so hard to stay consistent with healthy habits?
Yeah, willpower is really something that we're not very good at. And because our brain and our body is just so well developed when it comes to energy, and it always looks for the pathway where it consumes the lowest energy as possible that is needed. And of course, when we sit there and we are anyway drained after a long day, now consciously going to the supermarket, or even if it's there, cutting all the vegetables, preparing that meal where we have at least half of the plate with vegetables, that is just taking us so much energy that we're lacking in that moment. So it is always willpower against energy level. And the body is smart. That's why it's also so hard to stick to healthy habits that require us in the first place more energy. So when we are drained, when we are totally exhausted after a day, then it's the worst possible moment to implement something that is not an autopilot pathway already.
Yeah. So we're playing the wrong game. It's eventually the energy game, isn't it? How do we make sure we balance our energy during the day?
Absolutely. So the trick actually is, or something that makes it easier, is to wake up and think of what is going to be my heaviest challenge, my hardest challenge today, if I want to proceed with my healthy habit. And, being so conscious and aware that, okay, if I now go to work and then have the afternoon with my kids, will I then honestly have the power to prepare ourselves a healthy meal? Or what can I do? What alternatives do I have to come up with a solution that is maybe not 100% there where I want it to, but at least is there 85%? So maybe I'm going to buy some already cut vegetables, or I have something that I cut in a nice, enjoyable moment and put it in the freezer before so that it's already prepared. So it's an energy game, exactly. And we need to already foresee what are the moments that might be most challenging for us. Where is our game at risk to be, overridden by the old autopilot again?
and then already finding solutions in order to prevent that.
Right, right. How does resilience fit in all of this? So, what is resilience? And especially my concern is with children who are growing up with all the modern conveniences. How do we make sure our children are going to be resilient going forward?
Yeah, I think resilience for me is something where you, on the one hand, you're really aware of what is there that is costing me energy, what is draining me, and what, on the other hand, really is helping me to be at my best possible state, at my best possible energy state. And I think, first of all, it's super helpful to get that clarity for yourself. And journaling is super powerful because often we have so many healthy ideas and habits that we want to implement into our life, like eating more healthy, moving more, trying to avoid the screen in the evening. But then when we just switch to autopilot and go throughout our day without being really aware of what's going on, then it's super hard to change something because it's just always the way that costs our body the lowest energy. So journaling is something that helps you also being quite aware of when did I have my last, I don't know, my little eating experience where I was constantly snacking and have something savory and something sweet, and what were the factors that were playing into that. And I think that is important for ourselves to have that transparency. What are factors that seem to play quite an important role in my personal life? And then also having discussions around that, having conversations with your partner at dinner time so that the kids, quite from an early point of time, learn that this awareness is something natural that we should all have, that we are not always on autopilot just talking about the superficial things, but what is really happening with myself? What patterns do I recognize for myself? And then automatically they are stimulated to think of their own patterns that they might realize in themselves. And especially their consciousness about these patterns that you recognize will be a huge first step. And the second thing is also not being afraid of stressful situations, but really bring yourself out there in situations where you're not clear what the outcome might bring, where you know you might fail, you might not be able to bring your best result in there, but still it's better to take the challenge than you can win. Otherwise, there is not even, you're just taking yourself the chance to win something and to grow from it. And I think that whole growth mindset, to really live that and to create an identity, a family identity that we are growing minds, or we have growing mindsets, or we are growers. And growing is in the end worth for to try out new things that might even go wrong.
I love it what you say, the identity being the growth mindset of the whole family, not just of you, but of the whole family. And I think I recently shared this on LinkedIn. One of the learnings I had around resilience, in addition to everything that you have said, Miriam, it completely resonates with me. During my final climb on Kilimanjaro, the very first hour, it was an 8 hour climb. It's a 9 day expedition, and this was the most important climb. And during the first hour, I fell sick. It's something that I cannot do anything about. It's just how my body is reacting to the altitude. So even though I had prepared for months and we had been climbing for 7 days by then, still this happened. And it is the final climb. So it is quite disheartening in a way to say, okay, maybe I'm not able to complete this final climb. Maybe I'm not able to summit. And in that moment, one of our guides, Gideon, he came running to me with all sorts of energy bars and juices and water and whatnot. And he said, just eat, just drink. You need it right now. Your body needs it right now. And that literally revived me. For those next 7 hours, he walked next to me the whole time. And inside my mind, I knew I could rely on him, but I could also rely on a couple of other climbers who were doing very well and going very strong. So in our breaks, I just sat next to them and it just gave me an extra boost of energy. And that day I learned that resilience is not just us pushing our mind and saying we will do it, but it's also maybe able to rely on other people and take support, which I think in the day of today, we are not doing enough. From what I observe, there's a lot of, hey, this is how our family should look like. This is how I should look like in society. And, we're all perfect measurements, especially in the case of social media. There's a lot of demand put on us on perfection. And that perfection doesn't allow us to reach out and be vulnerable and say, hey, I actually need help here. So I think for me, that lesson still stays. And having two, three people to rely on in your life is something that now I start to look for more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the social support is absolutely underrated or underestimated, the power of that social support, right? And I love this story because I think that is exactly a picture of our society nowadays. Your story from the Kilimanjaro, that we always feel like we need to go that independent, we need to do that by ourselves. Also, we are in a kind of competitive state often with what you said, like with social media. We get these pictures of beautiful surroundings and happy people, and yeah, trying to provide us with a picture that everybody is living a better life and has found their way or their life already, and we're just the ones that are struggling sometimes. And I think in the end we all know that this is not reality, that they all have their moments, right?
Absolutely.
But it's so helpful to share that, and we all also know about that feeling that we have when we realize, oh, we are not alone. We're other people do have the same perception sometimes, or the same feeling. So, like you say, I think vulnerability is an underestimated superpower, and we have to start somewhere. So often it helps when you start sharing something that you might not feel 100% comfortable sharing at the first place. But this only gives permission, or it's an invitation for your conversation partner to also open up and share their vulnerabilities and
Yeah.
difficulties.
Yeah, and I just wish us all together in the society would allow each other more to be vulnerable. And I don't think that's happening enough, unfortunately. I think there's a lot of focus on just adjusting and not listening to others where others might need help. I just hope that we as a society can make a step towards letting people be vulnerable, letting people being not perfect. And that's a discussion for another time altogether. But yeah, I mean, that would, I think, relieve a lot of young minds too, and to do what they want to do and shine instead of always being under this social media pressure.
Yeah, I agree. And also sometimes I do these little rounds in my workshops where I just do a follow-up webinar after all the good habits that we planned out for ourselves for the future weeks. And then we have this webinar looking back, what worked, what didn't work. And I put the special emphasis on what didn't work and why didn't it work. And I think this is so relieving for all of them to see, oh, but I really wanted to, I don't know, try to eat some vegetables in the morning, to start having my breakfast with some vegetables in the morning. But then sometimes I just had very few hours of sleep and I was craving my Nutella sandwich or whatever. And only this conversation about what things didn't work out and why didn't they work out, that only allows, I think, power for real change, because then again we can just make that connection. Yes, it's true, it was a super stressful week. I just had a couple of hours of sleep, so of course I didn't have the energy to then start with a healthy breakfast that morning. And I think we can only benefit from sharing these failures and difficulties, and also to learn to be more gentle and more kind towards ourselves, and not having this negative self-talk all the time. I'm a loser. I didn't manage to start with some vegetables this morning. I didn't go to the gym this week. Then we can be so critical with ourselves, and it's just helping the downward spiral to set in and draining our energy that we at some point need to start working out again.
Yeah, no, it's been a wonderful conversation, Miriam. So insightful, but also something that we can all connect with. You're a scientist, you're a doctor, but then you're also a mother, and this has been one of the best conversations I've had. I'm wondering, what is one ritual that Miriam follows? What is one ritual that you do or you have?
Yeah, I think it's actually two. It's the running and the time that I spend with my partner, or the strong relationship that we have. So to have time on a regular base to connect and to really share what is important in our life, what is making us worry, or what is triggering us in some situations, and what are things that are good at that time. I think these regular real check-ins, not on a superficial layer, but more on a deeper level, that definitely always is a good routine for me and also for my partner.
Wonderful, Miriam. I really thank you for coming on today on Inside the Bite and wish you all the best. We keep seeing you shining and continue doing that.
Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation that we had. Always happy to speak to you, Mega, and thank you for the perfect preparation and the wonderful in-depth conversation that we had.
Thank you. Thank you.